Have you ever had a thought in your head that sounded brilliant, but the moment you opened your mouth, it came out completely differently? You know exactly what you want to say. You understand the idea. You even rehearsed it in your mind. But then you start speaking, your words become rushed. You swallow the ends of sentences. You say, and more than you planned. And suddenly the person in front of you is asking, sorry, what did you say? And the frustrating part is that you know you're not bad at communicating. You just don't sound as clear as you think. Here's the good news: speech clarity is not something you're simply born with. It is a skill. And once you understand what actually controls clarity, you can start improving it much faster than you might expect. In fact, there are 3 simple things you can train that can completely change the way you sound. And the third one is probably the most important, because most people try to fix unclear speech by speaking louder or pronouncing every word harder. That's not the real problem. Let me explain. A few years ago, imagine you're sitting across from someone in a coffee shop. They're telling you a story and you're genuinely interested. But every few seconds you find yourself leaning forward, not because you want to get closer, because you're trying to understand them. They're speaking too quickly. Their words are blending together. Their sentences have no breathing space. And even though every individual word might be technically correct, the overall message feels blurry. Have you ever been that person? Maybe you've been in a meeting and had to repeat yourself. Maybe you've recorded your voice and thought, wait, is that actually how I sound? Or maybe someone has said, you speak really fast, and you smiled. But inside you thought, I know. The interesting thing is that unclear speech is often not a vocabulary problem. It's not an intelligence problem. And it's not even necessarily a pronunciation problem. A huge part of it comes down to control. Think about driving a car. If you press the accelerator all the way down, the car moves quickly, but you lose precision. Turning becomes harder. Stopping becomes harder. Everything feels rushed. Your voice works in a surprisingly similar way. When your speech has no control over speed, pauses, breathing, and articulation, your listener has to work harder to understand you. And whenever your listener has to work too hard, they stop focusing on your message and start focusing on decoding your words. That is the opposite of powerful communication. So let's fix it. The first step is incredibly simple. Slow down your words, not your energy. This distinction changed the way I think about speaking. Because when people hear, speak slower, they often imagine someone talking like this. I am going to tell you. That doesn't sound confident. It sounds like your brain is buffering. The goal isn't to become slow. The goal is to become deliberate. There is a massive difference. Imagine you're handing someone a glass of water. If you throw the glass toward them, they might catch it, but there's a lot of unnecessary chaos. If you carefully place it in their hand, the transfer becomes effortless. Your words are the same. You are transferring thoughts from your mind into another person's mind. So don't throw your thoughts at them. Place them there. One of the easiest ways to do this is to practice something called the thought pause. Before you say the important part of a sentence, give yourself half a second, not a dramatic pause. Just enough space for your brain to organize what comes next. Instead of saying, I think the biggest mistake people make is they try to sound confident and then they end up speaking too quickly. Try, I think the biggest mistake people make is trying too hard to sound confident. Feel the difference. The second version gives the listener somewhere to stand. And here's something fascinating. Pauses don't make you sound less confident. They often make you sound more confident. Why? Because nervous speakers feel like they have to fill every second with sound. Confident speakers are comfortable with silence. Think about the most powerful people you've heard speak. Do they race to the next sentence? Usually not. They allow important ideas to breathe. So here's your first exercise. Take any paragraph from a book, an article, or even this script. Read it out loud. But every time you finish a complete thought, pause for 1 second, not 5 seconds. 1. And while you're doing it, don't try to sound impressive. Try to sound understandable, because clarity is not about impressing the listener. It's about making understanding easy. Now, once you control your speed, we move to the second step. And this one is where many people discover why their speech sounds slightly muffled. You need to finish your words. Think about the difference between someone saying, I really wanted to talk to you about something important, and someone saying, I really want to talk to you about something important. Now, there is nothing wrong with casual speech. We naturally shorten words when we talk. The problem happens when every word gets reduced. You start losing the final sounds. Becomes going, want, becomes one. Important becomes homportant, and eventually your sentences become a stream of sounds rather than a series of clear words. Here's the surprising part. You don't need to exaggerate your pronunciation in normal conversation. You simply need to become more aware of the edges of your words. Think of each word as a little box. When you speak clearly, you open the box, deliver the word, and close it. When you're nervous or rushing, you open the next box before you've closed the previous one. Everything starts blending together. So how do you train this? Try what I call the last word exercise. Take a sentence like, I want you to remember this idea. Now say it normally, then repeat it, but give extra attention to the final sound of each important word. I want you to remember this idea. You're not shouting, you're not speaking unnaturally, you're simply completing the word. Do this for 5 minutes a day. And here's where it gets interesting. You can make this into a game. Record yourself saying 10 sentences, then listen back. But don't judge your voice. Instead, ask one question. Can I clearly hear the beginning and ending of each important word? If the answer is no, you have found something you can train. And this is where a lot of people make a mistake. They listen to their recording and think, I hate my voice. A stop. That's not the exercise. Your voice is not the problem. Your lack of control is the problem. And control can be trained. Now we arrive at the third step. And this might be the biggest transformation of all. Stop trying to speak from your mouth. Start speaking from your breath. I know that sounds strange, but think about what happens when you're nervous. Your breathing becomes shallow, your chest tightens, you rush your sentences. Then you reach the end of the sentence and suddenly realize you have no air left. So what do? You squeeze the final words out. Your voice gets weaker. Your pronunciation gets messy. And then you take a giant breath and start the cycle again. Sound familiar? This is why some people sound perfectly clear when they're relaxed with friends, but completely different when they're presenting, interviewing, or speaking to someone important. Their knowledge didn't disappear, their voice simply lost its foundation. Your breath is the engine behind your speech. And if the engine is unstable, the voice becomes unstable. Here's a simple exercise. Before you speak, breathe in quietly through your nose. Then begin your sentence while your body still feels relaxed. Don't try to use every bit of air. Just let the breath support the sentence. Then pause. Breathe again. Continue. You might notice something strange at first. You may feel like you're breathing too often. You're not. You're simply becoming aware of something you used to do automatically. And there's another powerful technique. Take a sentence and divide it into thought groups. For example, if you want people to remember what you say, you have to make it easy for them to follow. You don't need to say the whole thing in one breath. You breathe, you speak, you pause. You breathe, you continue, this creates rhythm. And rhythm is one of the secrets behind engaging speech. Think about music. A song with no pauses would become unbearable. Imagine listening to a song where every note had exactly the same length and intensity. There would be no rhythm. Speech is the same. Your voice needs movement, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, sometimes softer, sometimes stronger, and sometimes nothing silence. That silence is not empty. It is part of the message. Now let's bring the 3 steps together. First, control your speed. Second, finish your words. Third, support your voice with your breath. But there's one more mindset shift that can accelerate all 3. Stop thinking about how you sound. Start thinking about what the other person needs to understand. This is huge because when you're nervous, your attention goes inward. Do I sound confident? Do I sound smart? Did I say that correctly? What do they think of me? And the moment your attention becomes obsessed with yourself, your speech often becomes worse. You rush. You overthink. You monitor every word. But imagine flipping the question. Instead of asking, how do I sound? Ask, how can I make this easier for them to understand? Suddenly, communication becomes less about performance and more about service. You don't need to perform confidence. You need to deliver clarity. And that takes the pressure off. Imagine you're explaining something to a child. You don't use complicated words to prove you're intelligent. You simplify. You slow down. You use examples. You check whether they understand. That's not weakness. That's communication intelligence. The same principle applies when you're talking to an executive, giving a presentation, interviewing for a job, or having a difficult conversation. Your goal isn't to sound sophisticated. Your goal is to make the idea impossible to misunderstand. And here's a challenge I want you to try today. Take your phone and record yourself for 60 seconds. Talk about anything, your morning, your work, a movie you watched, something you're learning, anything, then listen back once. Don't criticize your accent. Don't criticize the sound of your voice. Don't worry about whether you sound like a professional speaker. Just listen for 3 things. Was I rushing? Did I finish my important words? Did I breathe naturally? That's it. Then record yourself again. But this time change only one thing. Slow down slightly. Finish your words. Take a breath before your next thought. Then listen again. You might be surprised by the difference. Not because your voice magically changed, because your control changed. And that's the beautiful thing about speech clarity. You don't need a new personality. You don't need a new accent. You don't need to memorize hundreds of fancy words. You don't even need to become an extrovert. You simply need to give your thoughts enough space to arrive clearly. Because somewhere inside you is a version of your voice that is calmer, clearer, and more confident than the one you're currently using. And maybe you've heard that voice before. It comes out when you're talking to someone you trust, when you're explaining something you're passionate about, when you're telling a story you know by heart. Notice something, you already have the ability. We're not creating a new voice. We're removing the habits that get in its way. So the next time you walk into a conversation, don't tell yourself, I need to sound confident. Tell yourself, give them the words clearly, slow down, finish the word, breathe. Then let the next thought arrive, because the goal of great communication isn't to make people think, wow, what an incredible speaker. The deeper goal is to make them forget they're listening to a speaker at all. They simply understand you. They trust you. They remember you. And when your words become clear, something else often becomes clear too, your confidence. Because confidence isn't always something you have to find before you speak. Sometimes confidence is what appears when you finally trust yourself to take your time. So don't wait until you feel confident to speak clearly. Practice speaking clearly and let confidence catch up with you. Your voice carries your ideas. Make those ideas easy to hear.